Imagine sitting down to take a test on a skill you supposedly mastered back in, like, the 4th grade. You probably feel pretty confident, right? I mean, you know how to read, you know how to summarize a story, you can pull facts from a paragraph, but then you get your score back and you failed.
You've completely bombed it.
Yeah, completely bombed it. And why? Because the test wasn't asking you what you read. It was asking you to identify the underlying invisible architecture of the text. And it turns out, as adults living in this world of constant information overload, we are shockingly bad at doing that.
We really are. It is a totally different cognitive muscle. We're incredibly conditioned to just skim for surface-level facts. You know, we want the bullet points, the who, what, where, when.
Yeah, just give me the quick summary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But moving beyond that, to extract the deeper argument, the underlying structural truth of a text, that requires a completely different kind of reading.
Which brings us to our mission for today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are actually looking at a comprehensive study guide designed for the TEAS and HESI nursing entrance exams.
Specifically, we're looking at their section on identifying theme and central message.
Right. But we aren't here to just memorize test prep. We're using the study guide because it holds the ultimate shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. The goal today is to master the skill of extracting the big idea behind any text, effectively cutting through the noise and, honestly, the manipulation we face every day. Okay, let's unpack this.
I think the best place to start is by drawing a hard line between two things that get constantly conflated. We need to distinguish between what a text is about on the surface and what a text is actually saying.
Because those are not the same thing.
Not at all. And that distinction is vital. It's not just some hoop to jump through for a nursing exam. It is the absolute foundation of critical thinking.
Right. Before we can go mining for a theme, we have to define what it actually is. And maybe more importantly, what it isn't. Our source material defines theme as the underlying insight, observation, or argument about life, human nature, or the world that a piece of writing conveys through its content as a whole.
Yeah, and as a whole is the operative phrase there. It is never just the surface-level subject matter. The testing bodies that design these nursing exams, they know that adult test takers constantly fall into a specific trap.
They do.
They want you to deeply internalize the distinction between a topic and a theme.
And the source gives us a very rigid but honestly super helpful golden rule for avoiding that trap, which is theme is a sentence, not a word. I think about how people usually talk about books or movies. If I ask someone what the theme of a war novel is, they almost always say, well, the theme is war.
Right, or they'll say the theme is courage.
Exactly. But according to this rule, I haven't named a theme at all. I've only pointed at a bucket. I've just named the topic.
A topic is just a label. It's a short phrase or a single word. A theme, however, has to be a complete claim. Structurally, it almost always takes the shape of a subject plus an insight or an argument.
Okay,
So, using your example, instead of just the topic of war, a theme would be a full claim like, war strips away the illusions people hold about heroism. If you cannot turn your takeaway into a complete sentence, you haven't extracted the theme. You are literally just pointing at the scenery.
wow, pointing at the scenery. I love that. I want to try an analogy here because the source points out a major misconception where people confuse theme with a summary of the plot. And a summary tells you what happened, but the theme tells you what it means.
Yes, exactly.
So if reading a text is like looking at a patient's medical chart, the summary is just the list of symptoms, the cough, the fever, the fatigue. But the theme is the actual diagnosis.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the unifying truth that explains all those individual symptoms.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it, especially in the context of a medical entrance exam. Missing the theme of a passage is structurally identical to missing a clinical diagnosis. Think about the stakes of that.
They're huge.
Right. If you get the topic right, say, you correctly identify that the patient is experiencing severe chest pain, but you miss the theme, the underlying cause, which might be severe anxiety rather than a cardiac event.
You've treated the wrong thing entirely.
You have completely failed to understand the reality of the situation in front of you. That is why nursing exams test this concept so ruthlessly. You have to be able to look past the noisy, surface-level data to find the hidden structural truth.
But that implies there's a reliable way to find that truth. If the theme is the diagnosis, my first instinct is just to look for where the author states it plainly. Surely, in a well-written text, the author just tells you the theme at some point, right?
You would think so, but it is rarely handed to you on a silver platter like that.
Yeah.
The source breaks this down into implicit versus explicit themes. And the reality is the only time you really get an explicit, directly stated theme is when you are reading a fable.
A fable, like the ones we read as kids.
Exactly. The classic example the study guide uses is Aesop's The Tortoise and the Hare.
Okay, let me stop you there, because the immediate takeaway everyone knows from that story is slow and steady wins the race. But based on our rule that a theme is an insight into human nature, slow and steady wins the race sounds more like a bumper sticker than a profound psychological observation.
Yeah, you're picking up on a crucial distinction the test makers want you to understand. Slow and steady wins the race is a moral, not a theme. Our source draws a very sharp boundary between the two.
So what's the actual difference?
A moral is explicit and prescriptive. It is direct advice telling you what to do. A theme is descriptive. It is a broader observation about human behavior or the mechanics of the world.
Oh, I see. So the moral tells me how I should act, but the theme tells me how the world actually works.
Precisely. So for the tortoise and the hare, the theme isn't the prescriptive advice to jog slowly. The theme is a descriptive observation, something like overconfidence causes people to squander real advantages, while consistent effort can compensate for lesser natural ability.
Man, the difference in depth there is staggering. But since the passages on adult standardized tests, and obviously the medical texts nurses read every day, are not fables, they don't have morals tagged on the end, we have to find implicit themes.
Right, you have to dig for them.
So if it's not stated, how do we run the tests to extract it?
Pattern recognition. You extract an implicit theme by watching what recurs in the architecture of the text. You have to ask yourself, which conflicts actually get resolved? How do the main characters fundamentally change from page 1 to the end? What specific symbols or phrases does the author choose to emphasize?
So you aren't just reading the words, you're looking for the blueprint.
Exactly. You are looking for the underlying blueprint.
And the source emphasizes a massive pitfall here, which we can call the ending rule. People often read the first paragraph of the text, spot the topic, and immediately guess the theme.
Which is a huge mistake.
Yeah, because you can't figure out the theme from the opening paragraph. Since a theme usually crystallizes through change, like a character's realization or the final resolution of a conflict, you literally cannot confirm the central message until you have fully accounted for the ending.
To borrow your clinical analogy again, you can't diagnose the patient before they finish telling you their symptoms. If you try to guess the theme halfway through, you are likely just projecting your own assumptions onto the text, rather than reading what is actually there.
The source uses E.B. White's classic 1952 book, Charlotte's Web, as a concrete example to prove this ending rule, which I found super interesting.
This is a perfect example.
Yeah, because if you just look at the first half of the book, the surface topic is clearly friendship. I mean, it's about a pig named Wilbur and a spider who decides to save him from slaughter. But the theme isn't just a warm, fuzzy statement about friendship.
No, the actual structural theme is that true friendship involves selfless sacrifice, and that a life's value is affirmed even in the face of inevitable mortality.
And you only know that because of how the book ends. Charlotte dies. She spends her final fading energy spinning the egg sac and saving Wilbur, and the book doesn't shy away from the grief of that loss at all.
Right. If you try to extract the theme without including that ending, you miss the entire profound point E.B. White was making about mortality and sacrifice.
It's a surprisingly heavy theme for a children's book, when you really think about it.
What's fascinating here is how deliberate that choice is by the test makers. They actually borrow the structural techniques of children's literature to build exam passages for adults.
Wait, really? Why?
Because children's literature is often used as a foundational training ground in academia. Its thematic architecture is incredibly visible. The structural bones are right there on the surface. Test designers use those exact same visible structural techniques to engineer the complex passages you see on the TEAS and HESI exams.
Okay, so if finding a theme is like diagnosing a patient, it implies there's an objective truth hidden in the text to be found. This raises a major question. Who actually puts the theme there? Are we discovering a secret code the author intentionally buried? Or are we, as readers, just projecting our own life experiences onto the text and creating the theme ourselves?
This raises an important question indeed. In fact, it is the great debate in literary theory, and its origins go back incredibly far. Aristotle's Poetics, composed around 335 BCE, is the earliest surviving analytical work on narrative.
Wow, all the way back to Aristotle.
Yeah, he argued that a well-constructed tragedy must reveal an underlying thought or universal truth about human action. He wasn't using the modern English word theme, obviously, but his idea that narrative structure naturally produces an underlying philosophical truth is the ancestor of our modern concept.
But the rigid classroom-ready version of theme, the
Yeah.
one that demands you support your claim with textual evidence, that really got formalized much later, right?
Yeah.
By a movement called New Criticism.
Yes, starting in the 1930s and 40s. Before New Criticism, people often studied literature by studying the author's biography. They tried to figure out what the author intended to say based on their personal life.
Which makes sense on the surface.
It does, but figures like John Crow Ransom and Cleanth Brooks led a rebellion against that. They insisted that meaning lives entirely inside the text itself. The structure, the imagery, the words on the page. They argued the text is a self-contained machine, totally independent of whoever built it.
And that led directly to a very famous 1946 essay by W.K. Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley called The Intentional Fallacy. They basically argued that once a book is published, the author's intent is utterly irrelevant.
Completely irrelevant to them.
Yeah. Even if the author says, my theme was X, if the text actually supports Y, then the theme is Y. The only thing that counts is the evidence on the page, which, when you look at how standardized tests operate, is the direct ancestor of the close reading approach. The test is commanding you, look only at the passage, don't use outside knowledge, just tell me what the architecture of these specific sentences is doing.
But naturally, New Criticism faced intense pushback. Starting in 1938 with Louise Rosenblatt's foundational book Literature as Exploration, and later expanded by theorists like Stanley Fish, we get the rise of reader response theory.
Okay, how did that differ?
Well, they fundamentally disagreed that a text is a self-contained machine. They argued that words on a page are just ink marks until a human mind processes them. Meaning is actively created in the transaction between the reader and the text.
So because you and I have different life experiences, different biases, maybe different emotional triggers, we can read the exact same story and legitimately construct two completely different but equally valid themes.
Yes, exactly. Rosenblatt's transactional theory revolutionized the classroom. It's why modern literature professors will often accept multiple, widely different thematic readings of a novel, provided the student can support their view with evidence from the text.
Okay, wait a second. I have to challenge this, though. If modern academic theory and reader response say multiple themes are totally valid and depend heavily on the reader's transaction, how on earth can a multiple-choice nursing exam claim there's only one right answer bubble? Isn't that philosophically contradictory? They are testing for a singular, objective theme in a world that academics say is subjective.
It is a massive contradiction, honestly, but the answer is a purely pragmatic compromise by the testing industry. The organizations designing these exams aren't interested in solving a deep philosophical debate about the nature of meaning.
Right, they just need to score a test.
Exactly. Instead, they engineer short, tightly controlled passages to artificially eliminate ambiguity. They build these self-contained excerpts so carefully that only one thematic reading is actually supported by the specific textual evidence they've provided.
I see.
They essentially construct an artificial, vacuum-sealed environment where New Criticism works perfectly, ignoring the messy reality of how real readers interact with full-length books.
They box you into a maze where there's only one logical exit based strictly on the clues they left behind. But what happens when we leave the artificially engineered world of a test passage? What happens when we forget these rules and start flattening out themes in the messy real world?
Well, we end up wildly misinterpreting culturally significant works. Our source highlights a few famous misreadings to demonstrate the danger of confusing a surface topic for a deep theme.
And a prime example from the source is George Orwell's Animal Farm, published in 1945. And it's important to note here for you listening, when scholars analyze these texts, they aren't endorsing a specific political ideology, left or right. They are simply looking at the historical and academic consensus of the structural architecture the author built, which is exactly what we're doing right now.
Exactly. Neutral observation. So when people encounter Animal Farm, a very popular misreading flattens the entire novel down to a topic-level slogan, something like, communism is bad.
Right.
But structurally, that is a massive oversimplification that misses the actual engine of the book.
Because if we apply the ending rule, we have to look at the final scene, where the pigs literally become indistinguishable from the oppressive humans they originally overthrew. If you synthesize that ending into a full-sentence claim, the structural theme isn't a simple political slogan. The theme is that power corrupts revolutionary ideals regardless of original intentions, and that propaganda makes an oppressed people complicit in their own subjugation.
Yes. When you force yourself to state the theme as a complete descriptive sentence and you rigorously check it against the resolution of the ending, you bypass the shallow slogan and arrive at the actual structural truth Orwell constructed.
The source also brings up Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird from 1960. On the surface, the topic is a criminal trial. But the theme scholars most commonly extract, based on Atticus Finch's arc, is that moral courage means doing what is right even when you know you will inevitably lose.
Though keeping strict academic neutrality here, the source notes there are heavy scholarly debates about this text today. Competing thematic threads coexist in the novel regarding systemic racial injustice, alongside more recent critiques regarding a white savior framing.
Which perfectly illustrates reader response theory in action. In a full-length, complex novel, multiple defensible themes absolutely coexist.
They do. But again, standardized reading tests sidestep that complexity by using highly controlled excerpts. Now, a lot of people fall into the trap of associating the word theme exclusively with fiction. They think it only applies to novels and poetry.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the Common Core standards in 2010 recognized this exact trap and completely shifted the terminology. For younger grades, and specifically for all nonfiction texts, they started using the phrase central message. But fundamentally, it is the exact same underlying cognitive skill.
The architecture is absolutely identical. A hard science passage on a TEAS or HESI exam about antibiotic resistance absolutely has a theme. The test might frame it as a main claim or central message, but you extract it the exact same way.
Okay, so how would that look?
Well, the theme isn't just the topic of antibiotics. The theme would be a full claim, like the overuse of antibiotics accelerates the evolution of drug-resistant bacteria, and only coordinated global behavior change can slow it.
Got it.
The genre of the passage, whether it's a fictional story or a dense scientific report, does not change the underlying skill of structural extraction.
Which brings us back to the ultimate question. Why is this abstract literary concept the absolute gateway to passing a medical entrance exam? And why should you, the listener, care about this if you have zero intention of ever becoming a nurse? Let's bring it back to that clinical analogy of symptoms versus diagnosis.
For nursing applications, the connection is incredibly direct. Getting the topic right but missing the theme is exactly like identifying the symptoms but missing the diagnosis. Nurses are required to do this kind of structural reading every single shift.
Every day.
They have to synthesize highly complex research abstracts. They have to read through rambling, often contradictory patient histories to find the real clinical concern buried deep in the narrative. They have to decode dense patient education pamphlets so they can extract the core message and explain it to a terrified family in plain language.
If the nurse can't extract the central message, they literally cannot do the job safely. It is a matter of patient safety.
It really is. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a critical survival skill for anyone navigating the modern information age. We live in an era dominated by AI-generated recaps, viral social media posts, and clickbait headlines.
Oh, absolutely.
AI is very good at giving you a summary, the plot, the symptoms, but it often hallucinates or entirely misses the theme, the underlying why. Extracting the true argument from the surface-level topic is our baseline defense against misreading and manipulation.
It's the only way you spot when a highly nuanced scientific study gets flattened into a viral headline that actually reverses the study's original point.
Exactly.
Or when a complex geopolitical event gets reduced to a shallow tribal slogan on social media.
It's not just a hoop to jump through for a passing grade. It's how you maintain your agency in a world that is economically incentivized to overwhelm you with surface-level data.
So what does this all mean? If you're trying to put this into practice, let's weave together the core takeaways from the source material. First, remember, the golden rule theme is a complete sentence, not a single word. If your takeaway is just one word, you've only named the topic. Second, understand the difference in depth between a moral and a theme. Morals are prescriptive advice telling you what to do, while themes are descriptive observations revealing what is structurally true about the world. Third, apply this to everything you read, because nonfiction has a central message that functions exactly like a theme.
Just with different terminology.
Exactly. Fourth, always hold your judgment until the end. You cannot confirm the true theme until you've read the ending, because theme crystallizes through change. And finally, if you are taking a test, remember the artificial rules of the game. The correct theme must be supported by every major detail in the specific passage without any contradiction.
Mastering those rules will absolutely get you through the exam. But I want to leave you with something to consider beyond the test, something that builds on this idea of information architecture.
Okay.
Think about how the social media algorithms we use every single day are essentially giant topic matching engines. They feed us content based entirely on keywords and surface subjects. If you click on a video about a car, the algorithm gives you 1,000 more videos about cars.
Right, it's just endless topics.
Exactly. But what if an algorithm was designed to connect us based on themes instead? How would your digital world and your interactions with other people change if you were fed information based on underlying human truths and deep central messages rather than just surface-level topics?
Man, that is a profound paradigm shift. Imagine an internet organized by underlying diagnoses instead of just a scattered, endless list of symptoms. Well, we hope this deep dive gave you some new tools to look past the surface today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.